Kubit can help streaming media companies is by understanding what does the first or new user experience look like and how good is the platform at getting those users to start to watch something. One way that you can understand this is through a funnel. A funnel is basically a sequence of steps that a user has to complete in order to be considered converted. Install days are pretty unique to Kubit and tell you how many days since that user installed your application. In this case, because install days equal 1, this means this is the user's first full day on the app. The funnel I've constructed is users who selected their profile on their very first day, then went on to start streaming something and eventually completed it. You'll notice I have this ordered to sequence, which means users had to do steps 1, then 2, then 3 in that order, but they could have done things in between. I'm also looking at partition of day, meaning they had to do all of these 3 steps within the same 24-hour period. I'm looking at this weekly so I can understand all of my new users within a week. How good am I at getting them to convert through the funnel over the course of these few days? I've already executed my analysis, and now what I end up with are these 3 funnels. 1 funnel for each week. The funnel consists of the 3 steps I defined above, and I can see that on the week of 5/16, 187,000 new users joined the platform, and within the same day, 56% of them started streaming and 21% actually completed. So depending on my metrics or what I hope to achieve, I can understand if a 20 to 28% conversion rate within their first day is a good or a bad thing. What this funnel is currently showing me is those who actually converted or did the steps in the order that I've specified. Instead, I may want to understand the bounce or those who did not complete the steps. So instead of looking at it as 60% of users converted to starting a stream, 39% actually did not do that and fell off or dropped out of this particular funnel. Similar to funnels, I may want to understand what different steps a user might take without having to necessarily define them myself. In those cases, path is a really great option because it will tell you of all users who started with a specific event and ended with a specific event, what did they do in between. So still looking at our install days of 1, meaning that users in this cohort or in this analysis only installed the application 1 full day ago, so they're basically new. Of those who selected their profile on their first day, how many of them went on to actually start streaming? Looking over the partition of a day. So they had to have done this in a 24-hour period. I can look forward or backwards in my path depending on the use case that I care about, but in this case, I want to look forward. And I'm also going to break down by app, which means show me 2 different paths depending on the application or platform that the user started with. So this lets me see how my Android group are maybe performing or behaving slightly differently than my iOS. I'll just look over a couple of days. I've already executed this analysis. What I get is a Sankey diagram that you can read from left to right of users who started with select profile and somehow found their way to actually starting a stream. The solid coloring is the iOS audience, so those users who were on iOS, and the hashed is Android. So it lets me see those 2 paths side by side to understand if there's maybe something Android users do slightly differently than iOS. Looking down this, I can see that most users end up selecting Start Stream pretty early in this path, and that's a good thing. We want them to do that very quickly. In this case, these users actually purchased a subscription before starting. Now, if I find a path in here particularly interesting, like let's say this one, for example, where they maybe continue to select a profile, that could mean that maybe they're hitting points of friction or maybe those users are experiencing an error. In Kubit, I can simply right-click on the step that I'm interested in and create a funnel directly from the path. One important way that you can understand how new users are engaging with your product is by looking at how much content they're watching on their first day. In Kubit, we recommend a histogram as a great way to understand what group of users are watching what amount of content, and better understand the distribution. One way you can do that is by summing the total minutes watched for only new users. In Kubit, we call it install days, and it's something we can actually create for you. What this means is they installed the app at least 1 day ago, so they're 1 day old. And I've created a histogram here. A histogram will let me group the number of users based on the value of this sum equation that I've created. In my histogram, I'm going to count the number of users, and I've gone ahead and create custom buckets of time, 40 and 80, 80 and 120, etc. Because I'm summing in minutes, these numbers represent minutes watched, so users who watch between 40 and 80 minutes. These are completely customizable depending on how many minutes or how many users, etc. you're interested in analyzing. I've already executed this query, and at the bottom, what I'll see is time series over the 30 days I've selected and several different colored bars based on the groups that each of the users ended up in. So the orange is users who watched between 0 and 40 minutes, purple is 40 to 80 minutes, so on and so forth. Now this visualization is fine, but it's actually kind of hard for me to understand what's important, what's standing out. So rather than showing it as a traditional bar chart, you get the option of showing it as a stacked column. So all users stacked one on top of the other in a given day. I prefer this a lot better. And now I can understand that most of my users watch between 40 and 0 minutes in a given day. However, on 5/25, I have an interesting spike of users watching between 40 and 80 minutes on that day, 11,143. So if I want to learn maybe a little bit more about those users, I also have the chance to create a cohort, which is really powerful because now my cohort will only show me users who watched between 40 and 80 minutes